So I think there was something deep down inside of, either let's just call it my spirit. That's the only thing I could think of. I think I do have the spirit of a fighter and the spirit of a warrior, and I think I always have. I didn't realize it was so strong. But I think that's what it was, is like, no, I deserve better. And I did not like somebody else putting a label on me and telling me what my life was going to be like.
Welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. I'm your host, Lee Brandon. This work started for me several decades ago when I started to see the impact I could make on people, helping them to identify the root cause of their health problems that no doctor could figure out, including serious back, knee, shoulder and neck injuries, acne and eczema issues, severe gut health problems, even helping couples get pregnant after several IVF treatments had failed. And it really moves me to be able to help people in this way. And that is why I do what I do and why we have this show. In this week's episode of the Radical Health Rebel podcast, entitled Healing Pain Through Movement, I had the pleasure of speaking with Cheryl Ilov, who is an author, speaker, physical therapist, martial artist, dancer, and former chronic back pain patient. With over 20 years of experience as a physical therapist in private practice, she has helped thousands of clients recover from pain and injuries by integrating the science of physical therapy with the art of movement. Cheryl firmly believes that our body has an incredible capacity to heal itself and that everyone can enjoy vibrant health and vitality at every stage of life. Cheryl is also the author of Forever Fit and Flexible, Feeling Fabulous at 50 and Beyond, and The Reluctant Ninja, How a Middle-Aged Princess Became a Warrior Queen. She's also the host of the FemiNinja Project podcast. As someone with similar beliefs and philosophies around pain and movement, I was keen to share Cheryl's knowledge and extensive experience, both as a chronic pain patient and as a therapist. I really hope you're going to enjoy this episode. Cheryl Ilov, welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to have you on. So, Cheryl, to kick things off, could you share with the audience perhaps a little bit about your background, your history, and how and why you became a physical therapist?
Okay. Well, I guess it would probably start in my mid-30s. I was very active. I was a ballet dancer. I still am, as a matter of fact. Not a professional, but I danced several days a week. I was studying Pilates. I worked full time at a local hospital as a respiratory therapist, and that was a very interesting career, to say the least. But it was about in my mid-30s. What started out as a little bit of discomfort and tightness in my low back quickly spiraled way out of control into a chronic pain syndrome. And of course, being a Western medicine trained person, I did what I was supposed to do. I went to the doctors. I went to all my physical therapy sessions. I did the massages. I took the medications that they gave me. They had me on muscle relaxers, painkillers, which was really delightful. Anti-inflammatories, NSAIDs were a really big thing back then. And instead of getting better, I kept getting worse. And I started spiraling down into this incredible, vortex, this pain spasm cycle, until I was almost completely non-functional. I had to cut back on my hours as a respiratory therapist because I couldn't function the way I had to, especially in emergency situations. It got to be so bad until the day that I went and saw one of my doctors. And she told me I was never going to be able to do my laundry and my grocery shopping, both in the same day, because the arthritis in my spine was so severe, I was going to end up being bedridden. And I looked at her. It was almost like she was speaking a different language. It just didn't compute in my mind. And I looked at her and I said, "You don't understand. I'm planning on going back to ballet class." And she laughed in my face and said, no, you don't understand. You are a chronic pain patient. You will always be a chronic pain patient. You will never have the life you had before or the life that you wanted. And she knew that one of my goals was to go back to school and get my master's in physical therapy. And she told me, she says, you can forget about physical therapy school because you're just way too injured and broken to do the work. And even if you could, you are way too old to go back to school. And I was 36 years old, or I like to say 36 years young. Well, I went home and I hit rock bottom. I mean, you think about it, that woman, she destroyed my dreams. She shattered my hope. She crushed my spirit, leaving me with nothing except, she told me then to start applying for disability because I was going to need it. So I went home, I hit rock bottom, and it took a few days until I had this epiphany. And I realized, wait a minute. They're not helping you. They're not making you better. They're making you worse. This is up to you to figure out on your own. And that was a scary moment. But it was also in some way very empowering because I felt like I was breaking through these shackles that somebody had me, bound, that they were going to control me. And I thought, I might still be in pain, but at least I'm in control of what happens to me. So I stopped taking all the medications. First I fired my entire medical team and they were very upset about that because, I needed them because they were going to take care of me. It was almost like somebody was patting me on the head going, no, shush, 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 we'll take care of you. So I stopped the medications. What's really
interesting? So, sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, what's really interesting is that, very sadly, the majority of, let's say, medical professionals, if you have pain, arthritis, any kind of disease or things like that, in the majority of cases, very sadly, they think that it's a one-way street, that at best it will just stay there. But actually, the most likely thing is it's just going to get worse and it's just going to get worse and it's just going to get worse. And the only thing you can do is manage it as best as you can, often with things that are going to cause other problems, right? And then this is where, and particularly in the United States, people end up on this pharmaceutical merry-go-round that they just can't get off, whereas the reality is what I'm sure you're going to tell us next. So I'll let you continue.
Well, and I love the pharmaceutical, what do you call it? The carousel or whatever it was.
Merry-go-round.
Merry-go-round, yes. Yeah. I have had a delightful...
It's not so merry, though.
No, it's definitely not merry at all. And I had a guest on my podcast who called it the doctor dance. And it's not the kind of dance that I would suggest. But anyway, so I stopped the pharmaceuticals. And, of course, in my Western medicine trained mind, I was going against everything I was taught in my training, in my education, and the way I was working as a respiratory therapist. But it was like, this isn't working. I've got to take the reins. So I stopped, like I said, the medications. I stopped doing, I can say this now because I am a physical therapist. I stopped doing all the stupid stretches and exercises that the PTs gave me because they weren't working anyway, and I didn't see the point. And what I did is I started to teach myself how to move again, like the way we did when we were babies and children. Nobody told us when we were little babies lying in our crib, here are these little baby barbells. Go ahead and do 10 reps so we can strengthen your arms. Then you're going to put one hand here, move your hip like this, and that will make you roll over in your crib. We figured it out on our own. And that's how we learned to move during our, formative years. Well, as we matured, we kind of started relying on coaches, whether it be in sports, in dance, gymnastics, swim team, whatever, and they would tell us the right and the wrong way to move. So the ability to just explore our own environment, our own bodies through movement kind of just got weaned out of us. And then when we get into pain, we start looking at somebody else to fix us. So I did not know that cognitively, and I could not have described that to you back then. But intuitively, I knew that I knew how to move So I would just get down on the floor every day, figure out if I move this way, it feels better. If I move this way, it causes pain. So I did that. And the only one thing that I did add was acupuncture. And that helped tremendously, calming down, the nerve pain, calming my nervous system. But the funny thing was, as a Western medically trained person, I was embarrassed even to walk into an acupuncturist's office because I thought, oh my gosh, what if somebody sees me? This is so embarrassing. It was magical. And I'm not going to say that it was an easy journey, but it took about 8 or 9 months. And I was completely pain-free. I was stiff. I was out of shape. I had gained weight, but I was no longer in pain. And that's how the whole thing started. Shortly after that, I did get accepted into the master's program for physical therapy at Colorado University. And I went through that training. And when I finished, and even as I was going through it, I realized I don't like this. I did not like the training because I didn't I don't know why I thought I would like being a physical therapist if, as a patient of physical therapy, it did not help me. But what I did learn along the way was once I graduated, I was able to go out on my own. And I opened my own practice, and I started teaching my clients how to heal themselves rather than, and I would tell them that right away, I will not help you. I will not fix you. I will not heal you. I will give you the tools to heal yourself. And I did that for 20 years, had a booming practice, and taught a lot of people, just the secret of the art of healing through movement.
Interesting. So I guess you've touched on it a little bit already, but how did you become interested in pursuing a path of self-discovery and self-healing?
Through desperation, because I hit rock bottom. There was no place else to go. And when I realized after that doctor had told me, what my future was going to be, and it was like, no, I do not accept this. So I think there was something deep down inside of, either let's just call it my spirit. That's the only thing I could think of. I think I do have the spirit of a fighter and the spirit of a warrior, and I think I always have. I didn't realize it was so strong. But I think that's what it was, is like, no, I deserve better. And I did not like somebody else putting a label on me and telling me what my life was going to be like.
Yeah. Did you ever go back to your original medical team and say, hey, look at me?
No, I just didn't even see what the point would be. It's like,
very true.
If I had, I probably would have gotten the response, see, we told you it was in your head all along. Because I did hear that a lot. But then, of course, they decided that they saw some arthritic changes, on the X-ray or MRI. Well, anybody over the age of 30 is going to have arthritic changes, and arthritic changes does not mean pain. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's like, if you did an MRI on almost everyone living in the Western world of their lumbar spine, you're going to see disc derangements and, maybe some facet joint arthritic, signs, but probably only 8% of them are going to be in pain at that point.
Exactly. And actually, basically, I was diagnosed later. And I don't even know if maybe I was the one that diagnosed me, or no, might have been a chiropractor. I had a facet lock. So I had a facet lock. My SI joint was out. So there was an incredible amount of compression on my sciatic nerve. So, hello, I think it must have been the acupuncturist was also a chiropractor, the one that I went to for chiropractic. And he said that was the problem. He says, you've got a facet lock. It's not that hard to fix. Well, for 2.5 years,
absolutely,
Western medicine couldn't fix it or diagnose it.
Yeah, it's interesting when you were saying about, you were on anti-inflammatories, painkillers, muscle relaxants. It reminds me of, it was over 10 years ago now, I ruptured my L45 and L5S1 lumbar discs. And I went to my general practitioner to get a referral to get an MRI because I already knew by the symptoms. I knew from the dermatomes that were numb in my leg. I kind of knew it was the L45 and L5S1, but I just wanted to see how serious it was. And, I went to see him, and within about 5 minutes, it was very clear that he knew very little about what was going on because I was telling him exactly what was going on. When I was saying things like dermatomes, his eyes were glazing over. and when I told him I was flying to San Diego in 4 weeks' time, and he was saying, "No, you're not." And I was saying, "No, I am." And he said, "You're not flying." And I was like, "Yes, I am." And then he said, "Well, anyway, I'm going to have to give you a prescription." And I said, "What for?" And he said, "Painkillers and anti-inflammatories." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to take them." And he's like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, if I've got damage in my back and I move into a specific position that's causing more damage, I want to feel it. I don't want to be numb and then cause myself more pain." And he said, "Well, as your doctor, I'm advising you should take them." And I said, "Well, you can write the prescription, but I'm not going to take them." And he said, "Well, as your doctor, I'm advising you to take them." I mean, he was very polite. He wasn't arrogant or anything like that. I think it didn't take very long for him to realize I knew far more about lumbar spine pathology than he did, right? But anyway, he wrote the prescription, and as I walked out the door, I just folded it up and put it in his waste paper bin on my way out. But it was the right decision because, I mean, within a week, I was doing, some exercise. I mean, it was very, very gentle, working on very much, inner unit type muscles. But if I'd have been on painkillers and anti-inflammatories and trying to do those exercises, I wouldn't have felt when I was making the problem worse. So it's very sad. And also I know so many people that have had very similar injuries, probably not as bad as mine, and they've ended up with lifelong problems. I completely rehabbed it. It took 22 months. Discs aren't the quickest things to heal. Right. But I'm 55. I lift weights. I play tennis. It doesn't hold me back at all. I've got no pain, nothing. Whereas if you spoke to most medical people when I was 45, they would have said, "Well, forget playing tennis again, forget lifting weights, forget the job that you do," and that would have been an absolutely miserable life for me. All the things that I love to do, they would have said, "Well, you can't do that anymore." Right. And but I knew that's the one thing I was going to heal.
That's the one thing that fires me up more than anything and lights a fire under me is that word. You just said it, can't. When someone tells me what I cannot do, that's when it's like, you can't say that. And Lee, I also have to tell you this because I think this is really kind of funny. You told me that story when we first met back in July and we're having a conversation. Right. I still remember that. And every now and again, that vision of you dropping that prescription in the waste paper basket pops into my head for some reason. So it made an impression on me.
Well, my listeners have probably heard that story about 10 times now. So I apologize to those people that have heard it many, many times. But but it's just so typical, sadly, of our medical system. It's not a health system. Right. It's really predominantly a pharmaceutical system. Well, isn't it? It's not. And just, it's not looking for the cause of the problem. It's just looking to manage it.
Right. And I just want your listeners to know that you can't hear that story too many times. It's good to reiterate it because, but this is a really funny part of my story. That, she told me that one doctor told me I would be bedridden if I, did my laundry and my grocery shopping all on the same day because, you can't do that. So it was 20 years later. And I had another one of those, mental head smacking moments when I realized, oh my God, she was right. I can't do my laundry and my grocery shopping all in the same day because 3 times a week, every morning I would rush off to an 1.5-hour professional level ballet class, turn around, drive across town, go and take an 1 hour and 15-minute long martial arts class, And it was like I didn't have time to do my laundry and my grocery shopping all on the same day.
So she was spot on, but not for the right reason. It's because you were so functional and so active, you didn't have the time, rather than you were not physically capable of doing
Right.
that.
And as you said, at the age of 55, you're playing tennis, weightlifting, doing everything you want to do. I turned 67 this year, and I'm still dancing. I'm still doing martial arts, and I even started pole dancing several years ago, and I can still do that. So, every now and again, I think back and I reflect, where would I have been if I had believed them? And I think that's something I really want to impress on your listeners. Because somebody puts a label on you or a diagnosis, you don't have to accept it. That's just their opinion. They don't know. You know yourself, you know your body better than anybody, and you know what you want your future to look like.
Yeah, it's interesting. Something, again, I've mentioned a few times in recent podcasts, but when I was 40, I'd go to my tennis club and I'd see people, probably in their late 60s, 70s, maybe even a few of the people in their 80s playing tennis. Great. That's fantastic. But I would watch them move and think, I would love to play when I'm that age, but not like that. Because their bodies look so stiff. And it's not just their body, it's their mind. Like they're thinking so slowly. It's almost like the ball was bounced on their side of the court. Well, literally, the ball was bounced on their side of the court before they even think about moving to hit the ball. And now they're never going to be in the right position to hit it. So when I was 40, I said to myself, my goal is to play tennis when I'm 70, but be able to move as well as I can move now, as in when I was 40, right? So I'm halfway there. And I can still move as well as when I was 40. So I'm still on track.
But the thing
we'll see
is,
how that goes.
You already planted that seed in your mind, and that already started changing your neural pathways. And I mean, look at you now. By the time you hit the big 7-0, you're going to be moving just as well as you do now, maybe even better, because you're continuing to work on it. People think that we automatically lose function and mobility and flexibility and strength. Okay, yes, you're going to lose some muscle fibers. Well, yes, you are going to lose joint mobility if you do not mobilize your joints. But there is no reason why you have to. And it all starts, like you said, in the mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, everything starts in the mind, right? Yeah. Well, I'll definitely report back in 15 years' time and let everyone know how I'm getting on the tennis court.
Yes, I definitely want to know that. And trust me, I'll still be around.
Yeah. Yeah, probably won't be podcasting in those days. I don't know what it will be by then. But
I know.
Whatever the medium will be by then.
I don't even want to think that far in advance. Technology is not my thing.
Right. Yeah. I first met Amelia at a health club where I was hosting an event offering back screenings to the members. The first thing I noticed about Amelia was a dullness in her eyes, which I later realized was due to extreme pain. And I noticed that she was unable to turn her head and had to turn her whole body if she wanted to look in a different direction. Amelia informed me that she had a history of repeated shoulder and neck pain for the last 2 years and was diagnosed with spinal stenosis at C4-5, C5-6, and C6-7, and a stenosis is a blockage which in Amelia's case was in the spinal canal of her neck, irritating her spinal cord. She had extreme tenderness over her neck and trapezius muscles on both sides, and she suffered from severe neck pain continuously. Amelia informed me that she'd been advised that spinal surgery was the only option, but the surgery came with great risks, including potential paralysis, and no guarantee of success, which made Amelia fearful of the surgery. In addition to this, Amelia suffered from continuous exhaustion, painful intestinal gas and bloating, even though she felt she was following a healthy diet. After a thorough evaluation, I designed Amelia a corrective exercise, nutrition, and lifestyle plan, Plus, I referred her to a Nuka chiropractor for specific adjustments to her neck. After following the plan religiously, Amelia is much stronger and much more flexible than she's ever been before, and no longer suffers from repeated neck pain and has full range of motion in her neck. Amelia also reported that her energy was maximized and that she no longer suffers from the gripping stomach pains that had dominated her life for a very long time. If you're suffering like Amelia was and you'd like to find out more about getting to the root cause of your pain, go to www.bodycheck.co.uk, that's bodychek.co.uk, to request your consultation. So you mentioned martial arts just then, and so you started when you were 47, right?
Yep. I always say that I began my martial arts training at the tender young age of 47, but I did not go willingly.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
Well, it took my sensei 3 years to convince me to take some classes with him. He was my acupuncturist before he became my teacher. I was 44 years old. I was looking for a new acupuncturist. Mine had left town. Another one, unfortunately, had passed away. So I was looking for a new acupuncturist, and one of my clients said, "Why don't you try this guy? I really like him. And, he's really good. He also can do shiatsu." And I thought, if she likes him, because she was a very picky person, he has to be okay. So I called him. I made an appointment. I went in for my first appointment, and he had a dojo, a martial arts school, right next to his clinic. It was kind of little like a duplex situation. And so I walk into his clinic, and, he's talking to me, and he seemed like a really nice fella, nice guy, nice enough, and seemed to know what he was talking about and doing. So he starts putting needles in me, and when he got to my legs, and he started putting needles in my legs, he got a very far away look on his face, and he said, with your legs and my coaching, I could teach you how to kill with these things. So I'm lying on his table going, who thinks like this? Let alone says it out loud. And I'm thinking, I need to grab my purse and go. But I was literally pinned to the table. He had a captive audience. I couldn't move. I had needles sticking out all over me. So I just said, no, thank you. I have absolutely no interest in martial arts. I will save my killer legs for ballet class. What he did not know is that I had had a significant trauma just a few months before I met him, just like, I think it was 3 or 4 months, but I didn't tell him. And like a lot of traumas, when you try and get help, people are like, that didn't happen. Oh, you're making it up. It's in your head, blah, blah, blah. You're crazy. So I just stuffed it deep down inside and pretended everything was fine. And about a year later, it just all came spewing out after I had been triggered. And I just spiraled down into, it was crazy town. I call it sliding down the rabbit hole because that's kind of what it felt like to me. I don't know. PTSD is just such a strange thing, and everybody experiences it differently, and depending on the trauma. But I was really losing it. And of course, my past history of trying to get help didn't work very well, so I didn't want to ask for any help. But I knew intuitively, if I went to Mark, my acupuncturist, and told him what had happened, that he would not dismiss me or marginalize me the way everybody else had. So when I did, and I told him the story, and he's like, okay, we're going to start treating, the symptoms of the PTSD, blah, 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 blah. But then his campaign to get me on the mat and train with him went into high gear. And I kept saying no. And he says, you don't understand. It'll give you your power back and it'll do this. And I said, I don't understand how hanging out in a smelly dojo with a bunch of sweaty men trying to hit me and beat me up is going to make me feel any better, but thanks anyway. And he says, no, you don't understand. There is such a healing power in martial arts. And I just kept saying no until it took a total of 3 years. So another 2 years after that, they call me stubborn. This man never gave up. He just kept saying, just try it, try it. So I told him, okay, I was going to try a few classes. He wore me down just to prove to him how much I was going to hate it. Well, I didn't hate it. I fell in love with the art. I fell in love with the training. And I really fell in love with the sense of empowerment that I got from the training. And 10 years later, I became his first female black belt. In 20 years of training, he never had a woman achieve such a high rank. Since that time, that was 30 years ago. Was it 30? No, it was 20 years ago. Since that time, he has not had another woman achieve that high of a rank. So,
and what was the martial art?
it's called Ninpo Taijutsu, the art of the ninja and the samurai. So it's an traditional ancient Japanese martial art. Very, very classical, like a classic. That's why it takes so long to earn a black belt. It takes years, where in other arts you can do it in 2 years, sometimes even 1.
And what else, what other impacts did that have on, say, like your health, for instance, doing that martial art?
I was already fairly strong and flexible, but my flexibility it was like exponentially improved. And, you talk about when you're 70, you want to be able to move like you do now. My teacher, my sensei, is 73 now. And even it was like the last class before Christmas, and he was demonstrating something, and then he just hit the mat and rolled away. And it was like, how many people in their early 70s can do that? And the other thing that it did, it gave me, such an incredible sense of confidence in myself, not because I could take down somebody twice my size and half my age, but just moving even through the grocery store and just looking at everybody, paying attention to your environment. It is such a powerful tool that I really want to emphasize to the listeners, especially to the women out there. Please put your cell phone down. Please put it in your purse, put it on silent, turn it off. The world will not end, and start paying attention to your surroundings, everything around you. It's going to completely change your life and make you a lot safer. So that was just a few of the things. And just the ability to be able to move and flow in all of life's challenges, because life is full of hits and they come in a variety of different ways, being physical, emotional, psychological, financial, and to be able to flow, move, and, then come back and counterattack, if you will. It's a powerful skill to have.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, going back to my lower back injury. So, I ruptured 2 discs. I had severe sciatica. I had a dropped foot.
Oh.
I couldn't walk properly. I had to drag my left leg along as I was walking. I couldn't get shoes or socks on. Luckily, it happened when the weather was warm. And I remember, so I couldn't drive. I couldn't even sit in a chair. I remember I had to walk to the end of my road where I was living at the time in London, catch a bus to my doctor's and then get a bus back. But just walking from my home to the bus stop, so I'm walking along, dragging my left leg. And I thought an 8-year-old girl could attack me now and I would be completely defenseless. And I felt so vulnerable because, first of all, I'm in reasonable shape, right? So unless some guy was massive, I could, to some degree, protect myself. But obviously, the best thing is to run away, right? It's best to never get into a physical conflict because you never know, someone might have a knife or whatever. But I'm also a very fast runner. Even now, I'm still very fast. So I've always, I think, subconsciously had that in my mind. A, I can run really fast. And B, if I had to get to a fight, I could. But then when I had this back injury, I just felt so vulnerable, right? And what that did for me, again, it just made me think how important it is to stay functional because, and then I was thinking about lots of old people that you see walking around and you think, wow, they must feel so vulnerable because, if they are attacked in some way, there's absolutely nothing they can do to protect themselves. And, it kind of saddens me when I see people living lifestyles that means it's going to be inevitable that once they get to a certain age, even maybe my age, that they're going to be in that position, whether it's because they're, super obese and they can't move or they've got arthritis or whatever it might be, they're in pain or, if they try to run away from someone, they probably have a heart attack. It just shows you how important it is to look after yourself and to be healthy because, the main thing I try and push on people is it's your quality of life that improves. The healthier you are, the more functional you are, the more options you've got. If you say, I want to go and do this, I want to go and that, you can just go and do it. But if you're in pain, or if you're super obese, or you've got an illness, you're very limited in terms of what choices you've got in life, right? But going through that experience made it even more important to me, or made me realize even more important, not just about quality of life, but also not feeling vulnerable.
I'm really glad you brought that up because, that's a really very uncomfortable feeling of being vulnerable. And that's exactly what predators are looking for, and perpetrators. They're looking for an easy target. I think in the military, they call it a soft target. But you don't want to be that soft target. Even, I'm 5'7", 125 pounds, and I'm in my late 60s. But when people look at me, sometimes I have a way of looking back. I mean, I can tell, especially if they're a shady character, and it's just like, and there's an energy and an aura that a predator can sense. And then it's like, nah, I'm going to just move on to the next person because it might be a little bit easier. And even as somebody who is a little bit elderly or incapacitated physically in some way, there are still ways that they are able to protect themselves. So if anybody listening is interested in that, you might start looking at maybe local police stations, senior centers, or, different rec centers, places or dojos in your area that really specialize in teaching, older people. It's interesting in our class, in our dojo, we have a variety of ages, but we do have a significant amount of people over 50 and 60 even.
That's amazing.
And it is. It's pretty incredible, which just goes to show that, it can be done. But even people who feel like they are or would be easy targets can learn a lot of things to protect themselves. The number one thing is being how not to be a target and how not to be in those vulnerable positions. But, it's something it's really important. It's sad, but it's really important to be able to have some of those skills.
Yeah,
indeed. I actually saw something online. This was years ago, and I thought it was just adorable that there was a guy teaching, I can't remember where he was, but he was teaching older people how to defend themselves using their cane. So even if they didn't need a cane, and he called it cane fu. So it can be done.
I like that. So obviously I know, the thing that you do, you teach people how to move. Can you tell us about the power of healing through movement?
Oh, and that's it exactly. It is so empowering because the ability to be able to move at any time in any direction without having to haul yourself up from a chair or, really work on it. It's amazing to be able to have that ability and that skill at any age, and everybody can do it. I am certified in something called Feldenkrais. So if the listeners have ever heard of the Feldenkrais method, it is all over the world. It originated from an Israeli man. His name was Moshe Feldenkrais, which is why it has such an unfortunate name. But it is, it's a movement modality. I explain it as a highly sophisticated form of neuromuscular reeducation based on the scientific principle of neuroplasticity, meaning that our brains, our bodies, our nervous system, keep in mind, our bodies as well, are endlessly malleable, flexible, changeable during the entire course of our lifetime. So what we do in Feldenkrais is we start moving very slowly. We start moving very mindfully. We turn off all the devices, pay attention to how we're moving, how we feel, the sensations that are coming up as we move. And when I look back at it, intuitively, that's kind of what I was doing in some way, shape, or form, but I was making it up when I was trying to get myself out of that chronic pain situation. And it's exactly what you were doing, moving slowly and figuring out how you could heal your back without having those sensations being dulled by medications. So it's a very gentle, but yet powerful way of moving. And it's also very similar to my martial art. Because when we're learning a new technique, new movement pattern, we're moving very slowly and very carefully. And of course, as we get better, we still move slowly and carefully because we can really hurt our partner. But really paying attention to where you are in space. Something that would be similar if the audience would be more familiar with something, Tai Chi. Tai Chi is really, I think Tai Chi is the bomb. It's just a really wonderful way to get started, of really just getting that mind-body connection. Pilates used to be that way, but it's kind of been hijacked by the fitness industry that, it's power Pilates and power this and power that. The power is the inner strength that's already in you. And training your body in a way that it can flow is so much healthier for your joints, for your bones, for your muscles, for all of even the lymphatic fluid flowing through you. The body is an incredible creation, and you can do anything as long as, the entire course of your life, as long as you treat it well.
Yeah. I mean, I do use some Feldenkrais exercises in my work, and I also use Tai Chi as well. I mean, obviously I've been taught by Paul Chek, who, he uses those techniques in his own work as well. So yeah, I have some experience of Feldenkrais. I wouldn't say I certainly don't know everything. I've not studied it, but yeah, I've certainly felt the benefit of some of his exercises. And interestingly, I use them as part of my warm-up for tennis as well.
Really? That's awesome. I mean, when I started training, because it's a 4-year-long training program, so it's kind of grueling in a way, but also very liberating at the same time. And I remember going to ballet class after I'd finished like a 2-week training session. And one of the women actually came up to me and said, if your legs get any longer, we're going to have to raise the ceiling. And I thought, well, that's a very lovely compliment. But instead of doing the silly stretches, typical ballet things, throw your leg on the bar and do these side bending, I would just lay on the floor and do a little bit of the, like you said, the movement, the loosening of the hips and the back. And it's just such a nice way to warm up. And then when you stand up, you just feel so invigorated and flexible.
Yeah. Yeah, as I say, I learned those exercises from Paul Chek, and they are actually in my book that's called the Tennis Biomechanics Manual as part of the warm-up for playing tennis. So before you play tennis, some of the exercises that I suggest people do are Feldenkrais exercises.
I did not know you had a book.
Oh, well, 5 books.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have much of a life.
Okay.
I need to get out more.
That's really funny because I went to a Christmas party last Sunday, and it was an authors party. It was the Colorado Authors League. So I knew that most of the authors there anyway, and I thought, oh, this ought to be fun. And I was talking to one of my friends who had written 8 books since, the time I met her. And I looked at her and I said, Helen, how in the world can you, 8 books? That's incredible. And she says, I don't have a life. And I went, oh, okay.
So I'm in her club, obviously. Esther was in her 40s when I met her through a friend. She had really bad breakouts and was very embarrassed about her skin. Her acne was so bad that even applying makeup couldn't conceal it, and she tried many different facials and cleaning routines without success. Esther purchased the first edition of my book, Axe Adult Acne, after chatting with me, and in a very short period of time, she improved her diet, especially reducing sugar and flour intake, and she noticed a great improvement very quickly, which greatly improved her confidence levels. She now uses much less makeup than before because she doesn't need to conceal her acne. And suffice to say, she was very pleased with the progress in a short period of time and looked forward to continued improvements and a further reduction in the frequency and severity of breakouts as she made her way through the book. If you'd like to achieve the same kind of result as Esther, you can now follow a comprehensive step-by-step guide in my brand new book, Eliminating Adult Acne for Good, available now from all major online bookstores and via my website at www.bodycheck.co.uk/books. So what would you say is the difference between, say, traditional exercise and somatic movement?
I think traditional exercise certainly has its place. If you want and I don't mean this to be insulting, but, mindless exercise definitely has its benefits. Work up a sweat. You might want to just, work off some anxiety, some angst, anger, good for that. It'll make you stronger, but the somatic movement actually strengthens you from the inside out. So we're targeting more of the smaller muscles, the smaller nerve endings that are deeper inside your body, closer to where the bones are located, closer to where your spine is. So when you're working out and doing traditional exercise, let's say we're working in air quotes, the sexy muscles, the ones that you can see, the ones that everybody wants to see, those popping muscles. But when you work from a somatic movement approach, you're really strengthening the intrinsic muscles, the ones that are really supporting your spine, your joints, your nervous system, so that you can continue to play tennis when you're 70, to ski when you're 80, to play golf without back pain. It's that somatic connection, the mind-body connection, which is another thing, the mind-body connection. I think that's actually been hijacked too by the fitness industry. But really going deep into not the sensations that you feel as you're doing the movements, it's actually a very beautiful experience.
So it sounds like what you're describing, I would describe as you're working more of the slow twitch muscles rather than the fast twitch muscles, because that's what we call the sexy ones, right? The fast twitch, they're the ones that everyone wants to make look better. But actually, if the ones that are controlling stability of our joints, if they're not worked properly, you won't be able to work the sexy muscles because your posture will be bad and you'll have, probably be in pain. If not now, it's normally a case of when, not if. If those muscles aren't working properly, you can't stabilize joints. You're going to have excessive motion through a joint. If you've got excessive motion, it's going to end up with pain of some sort, whether it's an arthritic condition, it could be ligaments getting overly stretched, it could be a compression injury, so it could be a muscles getting compressed by bone. It is really just a matter of time if those muscles aren't really doing the job that they should be doing.
And I'm going to just drop a little pearl of wisdom here, especially for the ladies who are listening, that when you are working those intrinsic muscles, the sexy muscles get beautifully sleek, toned, and shapely and strong without building bulk. So you might want to look into that.
Yeah, because again, slow twitch muscles, they don't hypertrophy, they don't increase in size. So the slow twitch are what we call type 1 muscle fibers, but it's the type 2A muscle fibers are the ones that get bigger. So you're not even really targeting those when you're talking about somatic movement. You're not even really talking about those types of muscles at all, really. So it's quite interesting because I've had someone on the show talking about somatic healing. Are you familiar with that?
I've seen it, I've heard of it, and I don't really know what the difference would be between somatic healing and Feldenkrais or somatic movement.
Right.
I think I don't know the difference. I have seen it, or somatic experiencing, seen that as a hashtag on Instagram. I think that anything you do can be somatic healing. Even playing tennis, if you're, slowly just, hitting it up against a wall, by yourself, you can almost get into, I would think, more like a meditative state. So that when you are on the courts with a partner, or playing with a team, the power comes out. But anytime you get into that somatic sensing or somatosensory experiencing, it just makes everything easier. As like Moshe Feldenkrais used to say, it makes everything easier and effortless.
Yeah. No, I mean, from the episode that I did on somatic healing, it's like somatic healing is a way of dealing with, say, emotional trauma through movement and through feeling and sensation.
That's interesting because, and that makes perfect sense to me. But when we were doing our Feldenkrais training, when I was going through it, they never really talked, they says, you can release a lot of emotions, you can get a client, release all kind of stuff because as you know, the body always keeps the score. But it was something, it was really interesting. We never really talked about the psychological aspect or, the emotional aspect of it. We just focused on moving and being comfortable in movement and in your body. So if you can move easily and you can be comfortable in your body, then everything else kind of falls into place. And, Moshe actually worked with, survivors of the Holocaust and, of course, the incredible trauma that they experienced, but they never addressed it. He just helped them move more easily and be more comfortable in your body. Because with any kind of trauma, you do have that disconnect, dissociation.
Yeah. How do you work? Let's say someone came to you. Let's say they had the same issue that you had, right? Your back issue, right? So let's say, it's the facet joint that's trapped or a sacroiliac joint. How would you work with them?
That is an excellent question. And I just worked with somebody about 2 months ago. So it's, and I only saw her once. And that's always when I just go, all righty. And I went to her house, I had conversation with her. We had a phone call, she told me all her issues, what was happening. So I already had an idea. And then, when I got to her house, she said, I'll give you my reports so you can read all the medical support, reports. And she was also an RN. And I said, no, I don't want to read the medical reports because I don't want to be influenced in what I see in how you move. And I don't want you to be attached to what the medical reports said. So let's just put those aside and let's just see what we can come up with. So I watched her walk, I watched her stand, watched her move. And then we started on the floor because the floor gives you almost like a blueprint. The floor is almost a mirror of your movement patterns. And we started doing some very gentle movements on the floor. I gave her a little bit of a lift for her head because she kind of had a forward head position, so I didn't want her head too far back. We started using, some miracle balls. I don't know if you've ever used those. They're just small little, they look like miniature exercise balls, and you just put them under different parts of your body. We just practiced breathing, and then I'd have her stand up, and she's like, what happened? I feel so much better. My hips aren't as tight. My hamstring isn't hurting. My foot doesn't hurt. It's just getting out of that. I think a lot of what it is getting out of the sympathetic nervous system, which we live in, especially, this day and age. Oh my gosh. We're constantly being bombarded with bad news. Getting out of that sympathetic nervous system and being able to switch back to the parasympathetic state. And once you practice that through movement, it's even easier to do it when you're driving in your car. I had an incident. I was driving home from the mountains a couple of weeks ago, and some guy, I think he was road raging me. I'm not sure, but, the horn was blaring and it was dark already, and he was flashing lights in my, rearview mirror. And I'm like, I cannot move. There was a train of cars in front of me, so I don't know what he wanted me to do. And it was like, and so I'm trying to look behind me in my rearview mirror, and it was like, stop that. I just started breathing. I focused on what was ahead of me. It was like, if he wants to cross that white line, it's the solid line, there's a $250 fine. If you do that, he can do that. He can move on and just pass me if that's what he wants to do. So I was able to get out of that, that elevated state or that, escalated state and be able to stay calm. So I was actually safe. And that is an incredible skill to have. Just think about it. Even if you're having an uncomfortable conversation with a friend or a family member, instead of escalating and getting all ratcheted up, you can calm your nervous system and stay in that parasympathetic state, which is actually going to keep you safer in a conflict, even if it's just a verbal conflict.
So with this lady you worked with, you basically put her into a position where she could access more of a parasympathetic system. So you basically got her really, I'm guessing you got her in a really comfortable position.
Absolutely. Now, thank you for saying that, because that's the one thing that we do. I always say that there's no rules in Feldenkrais. There's no right or wrong, good or bad, better or worse, just opportunities to learn. But we do have one rule, and that is make yourself comfortable. So, and people look at me like I'm speaking a foreign language that they've never heard of before, because we're not used to making ourselves comfortable. And especially in exercise or working out, we have that no pain, no gain mentality. Well, in Feldenkrais, it's no pain, much gain. So if you're lying on the floor, it can be really uncomfortable. So you need to, maybe put a bolster under your knees, maybe a small pad underneath your head. If you're lying on a hard floor, which I love being the harder the better. But that's not for most people. You just take a bath towel or a blanket and fold it up so they have a little bit of cushion. There's so many things that you can do, but it was really interesting in working with this woman as we were just going through, the process, and she was telling me some of the things that the experts had been telling her over the course of the previous year. And I mean, it was shocking. She had hired a naturopath who wasn't local, but was telling her, basically she had her eating nothing. And she had lost a lot of weight, and then she was stressed because, it was just a nightmare. It was like this snowball. So we basically, just gave her personal power back and gave her the ability to listen to her own body.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. As you were talking about being comfortable, again, I was thinking back to when I had my back injury. And what I used to do, I used to carry a lumbar roll with me everywhere. I had to. Mm-hmm. I literally had to. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things I try to get across to my clients when they come to see me, now I do give them corrective exercise to do. Mm-hmm. And I say to them, look, you're probably going to be doing maybe 3 to 5 hours of corrective exercise a week. Mm-hmm. No matter how well you do that, that's not going to win if you're spending 68 hours a week in poor posture. Mm-hmm. Right? So what I did when I had my back injury is that whenever I was, say, trying to relax anywhere, or even, sitting down working, right? Again, I would have to try and get in as most comfortable position that I could. And I couldn't get comfortable without a lumbar roll. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't possible. But at home, initially I couldn't sit down at all. I couldn't sit in a chair. I couldn't sit anywhere. So what I did, I would just explore what positions I could get into for any period of time and remain comfortable. Mm-hmm. So it might be lying on my front with my arms under my chest, so my lower back had a little bit of an arch in it. Or I might lie on my right side with my lumbar roll under my left side of my spine. Or maybe put something under my head so that my head's not at an angle. And then after a certain period of time in any position, you need to move to get comfortable again, right? So then maybe I would stand up for a little while. And then it'd be right. Maybe I'll go back down on my front with my hands under my chest with my lumbar spine in a slight extension. And it was just a case of exploring what positions were comfortable. Now, if I lay on my right side, it was just extreme pain. If I lay on my back, actually laying on my back was okay as well, as long as I had the lumbar roll under my back. In bed, I had to dangle my left foot off the edge of the bed, because if the ankle was in dorsiflexion because of the sciatic nerve, it would cramp. So I literally had to have my left foot hanging off the edge of the bed. So I can completely relate to listening to your body to get comfortable.
That's fascinating. And your foot was just hanging there, right?
Yeah, just literally just hanging off the mattress.
Wow. That's so...
Just so it was in a neutral position. Because if it was plantar flex, obviously the calf muscle, the gastrocnemius, will be constantly contracting. Then obviously there was already too much nerve impulses anyway, because of the sciatic nerve was being pinched by the discs, and then I would just cramp, and then I'd wake up multiple times in at night. But as long as my foot was hanging off the edge, I was far less likely to wake up with cramp in my calf.
That is so fascinating. So I'm going to take you back to that same author's party, the same woman who doesn't have a life. And, we were talking, there was a group of us standing around a table talking, and I can't remember how she got on the subject, but apparently she was having issues, with her feet. And she is a ballroom dancer. And, she competes, and she wanted to still compete and do things. And she has plantar fasciitis, and she was talking about that. And she told me, she went to the doctor, and they said, oh, we'll just cut your plantar, fascia. And she's like, I don't like the sound of that. She was also a nurse who had worked in the operating room, so she knew surgery. And she goes, I just don't like the way that sounded. So instead, what she did is she propped her foot, I think, into a position of dorsiflexion, put a pillow underneath it, and her foot was in dorsiflexion when she fell asleep. And she says, oh my gosh, in a couple of days, it was gone. And another author who was talking to us says, oh, yeah, I did the same thing with my carpal tunnel. That's how I healed my carpal tunnel. So it's just amazing, little simple things like that of where you put yourself, position yourself in bed can make such a huge difference.
Yeah, and it kind of, it frustrates me. And again, I've spoken about this on the podcast before, but, when you read pain science papers and they say there's absolutely no link between posture and pain. And it's just looking at it in such a reductionist way. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket science to work out that, if you're, let's say, for instance, you walk around with your head down all day long, you're going to end up with a neck ache. You don't need to be a rocket science. You don't need to write a research paper to understand that, you mentioned forward head posture earlier. If you've got a really extreme forward head posture, the muscles at the base of your neck have to work really hard to hold the head in that position all day long. You're going to get a neck ache at some point. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to work that out. So it really frustrates me when you hear people say, oh, people like Lee's a charlatan because he spends time assessing someone's posture and then trying to help them correct it because it's got nothing to do with pain. I mean, I'm not saying, and I don't think anyone is saying that 100% of the cause of pain is poor posture, but it's just one part of the jigsaw puzzle, right? I mean, I know Feldenkrais was very much into posture, wasn't he?
Oh, very much so. But it was not, here, let's fix your posture. Let's correct your posture. He would call it neutral posture. And that's why I don't like to use the word, good posture, bad posture, because posture is posture. And, people would come to me and it's like, oh, I've had horrible posture all my life. And it's like, okay, take that label off, no judgment. But my posture, the way I'm built, is different than yours. But we all have our neutral posture, the neutral position, where, like you said, the jigsaw puzzle, everything just lines up, and standing is effortless because we're allowing, the forces of gravity to go through our skeletal structure in the way that was meant to be, rather than doing something really silly like having our head forward or, sticking your neck out like that or, just tucking your tailbone underneath you. It's some of the things that we're told are good posture is really stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a quote in my tennis book, actually, by Feldenkrais, which says that, Posture is where movement begins and ends.
Yes. Yeah. And that is true. And I think that is the key to health and longevity and full function as we age is posture, breathing, and mindset. Those things are the three big secrets. And people want to make it so complicated. And it's really not. It's just going back to the basics. And of course, then we're bombarded with information from the media, from the medical community, friends and family even. You're getting older. You can't do this anymore. You shouldn't do this anymore. you're too old to do that. Just, you just sit down there and pick up your knitting, which basically I do that too. But, it's like, no, put down the needles and start walking now and start doing things. Our bodies were meant and made to move.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting when you said, mindset, breathing and posture. And then you look at today's society and you think, what are we bombarded with in terms of the media, social media? What does that do to our mindset? Right? It's all negative, negative, negative. The world's going to come to an end, whether it's World War III or, the climate scam or whatever they're telling us is going to kill us next.
Yes.
And then what does that do to your breathing? That messes up your breathing, right? And then what are people doing 90% of their day these days? They're looking at their mobile phone, right? They're walking around. They're looking at their mobile phone like this.
There's that forward head position and the stiff neck.
There's your forward head posture, right? So, if you believe that mindset, breathing and posture is really important, and I would completely agree with that, this is probably not the best time in history to be alive.
Oh, I will counter that and say this is the best time to be alive because this will not defeat me. I think that's my mantra. This will not defeat me. And it's like, you know what? I'm turning off the TV. I'm not listening to the radio. I'm just, for God's sake, do not read the paper. You have to be in charge of you're in charge of what you take in. We have to be in charge of our diet. So if you're going to eat junk food, that's what's going to come out of you. We have to we have to guard what we take in, kind of like a jealous lover, be very, very careful of what you're taking in and that's another thing that people don't realize is that even if you're not paying attention, your brain is always listening. So if the television is on and you're saying, oh, I'm just not going to listen to this segment, if it's on, your nervous system is listening and taking it in and recording it, just like, we're recording here. If you fall asleep on the couch with the TV on, your nervous system is recording everything, which is really funny. There was a time where my husband was doing that. He was having these bizarre dreams. This was quite a few years ago. And he would tell me the dream when he woke up, and we laughed and laughed. I said, that's really funny. That's ridiculous. Where'd that come from? I don't know. And then the next night, and finally I looked at him. I said, are you falling asleep with the TV on again? And he goes, well, yeah, but then I wake up and I turn it off. And I'm like, Mike, just don't do it. Go to bed. Just turn the TV off.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, going back to that holy trinity of mindset, breathing and posture. But again, the top is mindset, right? The mind controls everything else. So, yeah, if you can, I was going to use the word master, but that's probably not the right word. But if you can maintain a positive mindset and you can look at the world in a positive way, then you can prevent perhaps the faulty breathing, the faulty posture. Because again, stress affects breathing, stress affects posture, right? Your emotions affect your posture. You speak to someone with forward head and rounded shoulders, that is not someone that's happy and confident.
And you know what?
Right?
If you can do that, if you can adjust your posture, I almost said the F word, fix. But if you can adjust your posture that your head is up, that lifts your chest up, you look more confident. And when you're standing and moving and walking that way, you feel lighter. You feel happier. You don't feel as depressed. And you can even practice this at home. Just, if you're sitting in a chair or standing, sink your chest and let yourself sink down for a while. It's like, well, I don't feel very good about anything right now, let alone the state of the world. But if you can just come up and be in that position, you're more engaged with your environment, and your nervous system is doing the happy dance. Let's just put it to you that way.
Yeah, I just want to go back a little bit to what we spoke about a little bit earlier. If you can imagine someone's listening to this and they may be getting on in years, maybe in their 40s, 50s, 60s, let's say, and they've got this belief that, it's inevitable as they age, they're going to get aches and pains. they're probably going to need to take medication just to get through the day, or perhaps they already are, right? They may already be in pain, you know, having to take some sort of medication to get through the day. What would your, I guess, advice be for those people?
You know, if you believe it's inevitable or you think it's inevitable, then it will be inevitable. And if you think, well, okay, I'm already a little bit, you know, dysfunctional, maybe, you know, your knees aren't that great or whatever it is, or you are on medications, it can be reversed. I'm not suggesting that you stop taking your medications, but what I am suggesting is that you just start thinking in a different way. Just change that script a little bit and think of the things that you can do and start making sure that you do get up from that chair, walk around the house, do other things. You can even use your activities of daily living as, let's call it the somatic movement exercises, of just really slowing down and notice how you feel. You know, if you need to hire somebody to help you do that, you know, do. But just if you stop moving, you don't start up again. But you can keep those tissues, the joints moving, the tissues malleable and flexible and soft during the entire course of your life. If you're in a rut and you can't get out, do seek help. But look for somebody, you know, likely who can help you with your mindset, and you can turn this ship around. I mean, I remember skiing in my 40s. And with my dad, who was, you know, at the time in his 70s, and we would see this one guy on the slope, and he was always there, and he was in his 80s, and he was the first one on the slope. You can do anything, and the body has an incredible capacity to heal itself. It just needs to be given the right tools.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. The thing that I often see as well is that oftentimes people begin to identify as their pain. So I'm so-and-so, I have fibromyalgia. I'm so-and-so, I no longer have cartilage in my knee. Therefore, I'm going to be in pain forever. They're both beliefs, right? I mean, yes, there might be some physical reasons also, but I believe you've got to start at the level of belief. So you've got to start with the mind, because no one is a condition, right? You can identify with a condition, but that's not who you are, right? And I think for a lot of people, it's quite scary to lose their identity.
Well, that's true.
You know, when I first had my back injury, you know, my identity was, you know, as a Czech practitioner, as someone that plays tennis, someone that lifts weights. I was in an identity crisis. Because I was thinking, well, if I can't do those things, who am I? I had put those labels on myself. That is who I am. I'm someone that's active. I'm someone that's healthy. Now, if you take that away, that would have been really scary for me. So I can empathize with people that have a condition that to take that away from them would change their identity and would be very scary.
It is,
but I would say
it is scary.
I would say to people that actually, if you can remove that identity, you can replace it with one that's far better.
But yeah, it is scary because you're like venturing out into the realm of the unknown. But on the other hand, it's so much more rewarding. And again, just being in charge of your health and in charge of your body and in control of it. And that's one of the quotes from Pilates. You know, with Pilates, you're in control of your body rather than at its mercy. And I think a lot of people don't like their bodies very much. And, you know, I would see that all the time, you know, still do in ballet class, you know, even at this advanced age. And there are other adults there. We take classes with, you know, people from the age of 16 to like mid 70s. And how many people are still just beating themselves up and berating themselves and denigrating themselves. And that is not healthy. Just love your body with all your heart, because it's the only one you've got, and take care of it, and it will treat you well.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So what would be your view in terms of how people can stay fit and healthy and pain-free in their 50s, 60s, 70s and beyond?
Oh, well, just keep moving. Just keep moving. I wrote a whole book on it.
There was a song that came out in 1989, and it was called "Keep On Moving" by a group called Soul to Soul, and it's a fantastic song. So that should be your theme tune, I think.
Keep on moving on. Well, it's true. I had a client one time. She's actually a neighbor of mine as well. And she was thinking about, moving her laundry was in the basement. So she was like, I'm so sick and tired of, climbing these the stairs to do laundry. So she decided she was going to move her laundry room up to the main floor. And then she thought about it for a while, and she remembered something I had written in my book that, if you stop doing the stairs, you're not going to be able to do the stairs. And she left the laundry room down where it was in the basement. Just when you stop doing something, you stop doing it and you don't start again.
Yeah. Well, my grandmother, she lived at the top of a hill, and she lived on the 3rd floor. There was no elevator. And I can't remember. Hang on, how old would she have been? She would have been I think she was 87 when she died. Mm-hmm. She never drove. She never drove a car. So if she wanted to eat, she had to go down 3 flights of stairs, down the hill. She lived about 500-600 meters from the town. Mm-hmm. She would have to go to the shops, fill up her trolley with food, and then drag the trolley back up the hill, and then lift it up 3 flights of stairs. Right? But you think, how good is that? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? Because it kept her young. Mm-hmm. Imagine if she'd have gone and lived in, an old people's community, ground floor apartment, definitely wouldn't have been on a hill, right? So, it probably added a lot of, not just years to her life, but life to her years as well. Mm.
And that's the important thing, life to your years.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, again, going back to my tennis story, that's, I love playing tennis. I want to be able to keep doing it. Mm-hmm. If I stop doing the things I'm doing now, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? That's what it's all about. It's all about quality of life. And again, it saddens me when I see people, and they just don't take any care for their health. And they eat junk food. They don't really exercise. They go to bed late. They might drink lots of alcohol, maybe smoke or whatever. And they think they're having more fun than we are.
Well,
I mean, maybe in their 20s, yes. Maybe in their 20s, but then I think time's going to catch up with them sooner rather than later.
Yes, it does, especially with the junk food. Well, with everything that you said, but when you start looking, when you go to the grocery store and you start reading labels and really looking at what is in our food, it's terrifying. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, I generally don't buy things if it's got a label on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if I can't pronounce what's in it's like, no, we're putting that back. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. That's a pull check saying, if you can't pronounce a word on the label, don't put it in your mouth.
Yeah.
So what would be your top 3 tips for people suffering from persistent pain?
Number 1, don't give up. Do not let somebody put a label on you. Do not let anybody tell you that you're never going to get any better, that this is going to be the rest of your life, because it does not have to be. So just don't let anybody put those labels on you. Number 2, start looking for alternative therapies, alternative ways of moving. I'm thinking that maybe you should talk to Lee. I'm thinking maybe you should check out his books. But just remember that there are so many other modalities that you might not even know about that can help you. When I had my chronic pain syndrome, it was 30 years ago, and we didn't have as many. I mean, there may have been those modalities, but they weren't as well known. Check out, excuse me, do not give up. If you try something and it doesn't work for you, just check it off your list and try something else. There are so many things, cranial sacral, there's Reiki, there's, Feldenkrais, there's the Czech movement. You've got there's so many things out there, acupuncture, there's so much. So do not give up. But if something is not working, get rid of it right away. Okay. So those are two things. The third thing is really work on your mindset. You can get better. You will get better if you believe you can get better. And if you feel like you're making progress, it doesn't have to be you wake up one morning and you're out of pain. It doesn't work that way. It's incremental. It's just celebrate every little bit of progress that you make. Write it down, keep a chart, keep a log, whatever makes sense to you. But just keep track of it, because that's going to give you even more strength and motivation and power to continue.
Yeah, I really relate to that part when you said absolutely believe you're going to get better, because again, I keep talking about it because it was it's the most serious injury I've had myself. And, discs have very little blood supply. This is why they take so long to heal. And, I've played sports for almost 50 years now, so I've had lots of muscle strains and things like that. And they heal pretty quick. The muscles have got a good blood supply. They can heal within a few days to a few weeks. And, I'd wake up again, I couldn't walk. I had a dropped foot. I was in a lot of pain. And the progress was really slow. But in the back of my mind, I just knew. There was no doubt. There was no doubt at all. Even though some days I'd wake up and think, oh, this is really slow progress. It felt like I'd gone for a month. There was no progress at all. But in the back of my mind, I just knew I was going to get better. There was just absolutely no doubt. And again, I would say this to clients as well. That's the most important part, right? Exercise is important. Nutrition's important. Getting sleep and rest is important. But you've got to get your mind right. That's the most important thing.
And what we believe is what we become.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not woo-woo. That's also hard science nowadays.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, awesome. So, Cheryl, what's next for you?
Oh my goodness, what is next? Well, I'm actually planning, I'm trying to develop a 3-year plan because, like I said, I turned 67, which means that, oh my God, in 3 years I'm going to be 70. And I want to make sure that I am running towards 70 with my arms wide open the way I did when I turned 50 and 60, because when I turned 50, my entire life turned around. My 50s were fantastic. My 60s have been fantastic. And I want to keep that momentum going into my 70s and 80s. And even if I live to be 90s, well, I want that. I want to be your grandmother. So, that's basically what's next. But in the meantime, I'm working on my 3rd level black belt. I'm working on my 3rd book, so I really, take my hat off to you that you've written so many, because this one's driving me crazy. There's just still a whole lot more to do and a whole lot more to explore.
Awesome. And where can people find you online, and where can people find your books?
You can go to my website. It's just CherylIlov.com. Make sure that you don't put an E on the end of I love. I'm on pretty much all social media. I'm probably most active on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I've got 2 Instagram accounts. One is just at Cheryl Ilov. The other one is CIlovePA. Get my books on Amazon. You could just go to my website and drop me a line, say hello. And I also do offer 30-minute consulting, complimentary consultations if anybody's interested. If you sign up for my newsletter, you have access to 3 20-minute long recordings, audio recordings. I call them on my website Meditation Through Movement, but they're actually Introduction to Feldenkrais. So if you want to explore what that's like, you can go ahead and download them and then unsubscribe if you don't want the newsletter. But that'll give you a start of a little bit of a taste of what Feldenkrais is like.
Awesome. And I'll make sure those details are in the show notes as well. And I can also announce LinkedIn have let me back on. So they deplatformed me about 14 months ago. And I just happened to try to log in the other day and they let me back on. So I'm back on LinkedIn, so that was quite interesting.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'll look for you there and I'll connect with you on LinkedIn because I love doing that. That's really interesting. Yeah, I guess you must have done something naughty, huh?
Yeah, telling the truth is it's not a good thing these days.
Yeah. Well,
it's not allowed.
One other thing I did want to mention, I do have a podcast called the FemiNinja Project. So if you can find that wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I would love to have you as a guest on my show.
Okay.
So we will get that going.
I will do that. Yeah, awesome. Love to.
Okay.
Cheryl, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's just a pleasure. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise. So that's all from Cheryl and me for this week. But don't forget, you can join me same time, same place next week on the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to give the show a rating and a review, and I'll see you next time.